Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, sustaining Alaska's pipeline and its operations today and into the future.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service, and it is the 13th of June. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information at weather.gov/Alaska. And if you go to weather.gov/Juneau, you'll get information about all of Southeast weather. And if you show up at the National Weather Service office in Juneau on Thursday, you'll be part of an open house. And there's several periods during the day which you could attend, but the one that you're most likely to be interested in is the public side of that open house from about 3 to 6 o'clock at the Juneau National Weather Service office there and up around the Mendenhall Loop region. So make sure you check it out, and I'll be there. I'll shake your hand. It'll be nice to meet with you and talk about the weather that you see and experience in southeastern Alaska. The weather info line will help you out as well. 800-472-0391. Find us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube. And during the afternoon, of course, you get your daily afternoon map briefing, a sneak peek of what we're going to talk about right here. And we're talking about fire danger first today for areas across the Brooks Range and the upper Yukon Valley. That's where it seems to be higher. And the reason it's a little bit higher there and not in south central or southwest is simply because it hasn't rained as much in this region here. Now, over the weekend, we did get substantial rainfall across the upper Tanana Valley and Salter River, as well as the Goodpaster. Those areas picked up almost an inch of rain in some cases there. Probably some places saw a little bit more than that. Those are record rainfalls for Big Delta and Delta Junction, as well as the Fairbanks region. That has allowed some of the rivers to come up a little bit over the last 24 hours, but it looks like even with last night's rain, that the levels are going to stay kind of put in the banks there. So no major flooding concerns at this point, it looks like. But just north of that is where things are a little bit drier. And some of that fire danger, though, is starting to poke up into the extreme level as you get into the upper Yukon Valley, as well as areas just inside of Kotzebue Sound and the Noatak Valley. For areas around Haines, the fire danger is going up again. Not a whole lot of rainfall right there in that immediate vicinity has allowed at least that a particular area on the northern Lynn Canal to creep up into the high region, but nothing really showing right now for south central, Copper River Basin, or a large part of the interior, let's say around Fairbanks of the Tanana Valley. All that said, things are probably going to change as we get into the mid to late week. The weather pattern is going to flip around once again from wet and cool across the interior and south central and the weekend rain that many of us experienced to a much drier weather pattern, and that continues for the Copper River Basin as well. Temperatures are going to soar back into the lower to mid 70s and in some cases maybe even lower to mid 80s for the interior. So it is going to be a hot period. That, as well as very dry air, is not a good thing for increased fire danger, and we will likely see this map change colors considerably by the end of the week. So pay attention to that, and as always, no matter what the forecast is today where you are, be fire-wise and be extra careful and considerate in your fireways. Here's a look at the visible satellite picture, and not a whole lot of precipitation falling across south central. Out across the west, you can see a lot of clear sky across Bristol Bay. Low pressure is working in from the North Pacific into the central and western chain, and a lot of low clouds and stratus with that across the Bering Sea, all the way up to St. Lawrence Island. Cumulus clouds developing across southeastern Alaska today. Up north, you can see the hints of low pressure trying to drop another wave across the north coast and around Kotzebue Sound. You can see some of the development here. The leading edge of this today has produced showers and thunderstorms, and as this is moving eastward slowly across the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, we're seeing some of that bubble up here. Lightning showing up on our weather system back at the office, and we're also seeing some strikes around the Talkeetna and into the Chugach and Kenai Mountains earlier this afternoon. So don't be surprised if you hear some rumbles around south central this afternoon. Overall, the pattern is going to be a warmer and drier one, as I mentioned, and you can see on the surface map that a ridge of high pressure here at 1,039 millibars is trying to gain control of the Bering Sea. And as it does this and slides eastward, it's going to move into prime position to really put things on slow bake for many parts of Alaska, certainly the mainland. For southeast, we've had some pop-up periods of heavy rainfall today, at least Juneau for about an hour there. It looked like some rain was falling at a little bit more than a moderate clip. Tonight, a lot of that's going to dry up. Showers are in your forecast, hit and miss around southeast, but that's about it. Look for a few showers around southwestern Alaska and some of the mountains there into the Alaska Range and Denali. North of that into the Yukon Valley, things are dry once again with high pressure dropping southward. Wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of fog around the Arctic coast and over the ice there, but by and large things are drying up, and while they are cool, conditions will turn back toward a warmer pattern here as we get toward the mid to late week for you as well. Across the Aleutians, a 1005 millibar low working north and east, but remember, it's got to cut under this ridge of high pressure, and that is just a wall of stability. The most stable weather rock you have right now is sitting there across Bristol Bay, and as we get into Tuesday, that scoots up a little bit further north of Nunivak Island. Still stable and still giving most of the continental part of Alaska more of a north and northwesterly flow, even over Kodiak Island. Now, the reason that's important is that is a dry pattern, and that will help to produce lower humidities across many parts of the interior and especially south central and southwestern Alaska. As we move into Wednesday and Thursday, that pattern is accentuated even more. Southeast, look for drier conditions for you as we go through Tuesday. Fair weather. There may be some showers up around Yakutat and around the Alaska Range. Northward again, hit and miss cloud cover, and then back into showers for the northeastern parts of the coastal plain. Another weak wave of low pressures moving off the Chukchi coast. With that, some showers across the Kobuk and Noatak valleys, and maybe even Kotzebue Sound. And it's just cold enough off the Chukchi coast that you might see rain mixed with snow showers there. Low pressure is moving back into the southern part of the Bering, and ahead of that is some rainfall, but again, it's not going to make a whole lot of forward progress. The little progress it does make as we get into Wednesday simply washes out that leading edge of temperature change, or that new air mass, and you'll see that now changed over to a trough of low pressure rather than that leading edge of a new air mass. It's mixed up a lot more, so there's still some remnants of that changeover, but the force of that changeover isn't as strong without that big sharp temperature difference anymore. Out across the interior, southwest, south central, things are dry. Look at all that clear sky across the region for Wednesday. And with, moving into summer solstice week and not too long here, that is a lot of sunshine beating down on Alaska, and things are going to be dry and hot. For southeast, look for some intermittent cloud cover. Showers, a much better chance east of the divide there, and as you get into parts of British Columbia and the Yukon, a better chance of thunderstorms as well. Most of the Gulf looks fairly dry as well, with high pressure sitting across the Chukchi coast at 1,025 millibars. That's a north and northeasterly flow. Relatively light and somewhat variable winds will continue into the midweek there. Now, temperatures across the region today back in the mid-50s for a large part of southeast by early afternoon. It was 62 in Haines, lower 50s for Ketchikan and Nanette around Petersburg and northward. Craig and Klawock saw temps there at a comfortably mild level. 63 in Hyder, 56 in Yakutat, upper 50s and lower 60s for Prince William Sound, Cordova, and Middleton Island, a little bit on the cool side with Valdez showing 63, 67 in Seward, 58 for Homer, 60 in Kenai, mid-60s already for Anchorage. This was earlier this afternoon. And 64 around Talkeetna, 61 in Fairbanks with 66 in Eagle and Fort Yukon. A look northward shows 64 in Arctic Village, but once you got up into the hills in Anaktuvuk Pass, temperatures began to cool down quickly, and that's where that frontal boundary is sitting there. On the coastal plain side and the north slope, you're looking at temps only in the 30s this afternoon. 30s and 40s around Kotzebue Sound. Kotzebue itself was 41, about the same there in Nome. Gamble had 32 at St. Lawrence Island. Amonic was 50 degrees. Unalakleet 46, 48 in Galena, and McGrath was a toasty 54. 52 in Bethel. Bristol Bay temperatures were looking like lower to mid-60s earlier today. Lake Iliamna 61, 65 in Kodiak. Low to mid-50s for the Alaska Peninsula, mid to upper 40s for the Pribilof Islands, and 46 in Adak with 48 in Atka back on the map, and 45 in Shemya. Now, look at overnight temperatures. Will stay in the lower to mid-40s for most of the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta and Bristol Bay, 51 in Kodiak, the upper 40s to about 50s for Fort Yukon to Eagle out toward the middle Tanana Valley, also mild in Fairbanks tonight. Mid-40s for south central, southeast in the upper 40s and even lower 50s for some parts of the Panhandle, 28 in Barrow, 41 in Nome, and 43 in Shemya. High temperatures tomorrow will warm into the lower to mid-60s for the middle Tanana Valley and Fairbanks and North Pole included. Fort Eielson there. 63 degrees for the Fort Yukon region, upper 30s to mid-40s for the northwest coast, and even Wainwright looking at some mild conditions there. Looks like Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse could approach 50 degrees. That's the warm-up we're talking about. For Southwest, even warmer. Of course, upper 60s and lower 70s are expected. Lower to mid 70s for South Central and the Cook Inlet region, and it gets even warmer after that as we head into the midweek. Here's a look at flying weather now. Most of the interior and south central and southeast will be looking at fair weather there. A VFR expected for many locations. MVFR across the north slope, and waves of IFR conditions are expected across the west in the morning. That should diminish, but that leading edge or that frontal boundary as it's washing out is still capable of producing and dropping visibility and ceilings as we look at St. Paul and St. George, as well as areas around St. Matthew and probably north of Unalaska and Dutch Harbor and westward. Here's your look at your pass conditions, and we don't expect a whole lot of issues there for the individual passes. If anything develops, it should be fairly short-lived. VFR conditions for Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass throughout the daytime tomorrow. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, we expect to see VFR. Rainy Pass should be VFR all day Tuesday, as well as Windy Pass and for Isabel Pass. For Mentasta Pass, things look pretty good throughout the day. Tanita Pass, we're expecting VFR conditions there. And for Portage Pass, things are looking A-OK. Chilkoot and White Pass right now looking fine for your Tuesday. And for freezing levels, you'll notice that cooler weather is moving away. Surface freezing lines now down across the north slope, and it stops at the Brooks Range. 2, 4, 6,000 foot freezing lines north of the Alaska Range. But here is where all the heat is coming from. Already levels across the central and eastern chain up to 12,000 feet. And across southeastern Alaska, levels as high as 6,000 to 8,000 feet. So this warmth is sliding eastward as we go into Wednesday and Thursday. Icing potential is limited, generally above 7,000 feet, and some of that could reach isolated moderate across parts of the Copper River Basin and Alcan and the northwest coast, as well as the southern Bering Sea along that frontal boundary. But out there, it's a little bit higher, above 10,000 feet. The jet stream shows that fast-moving river of air and its direction of travel and how that impacts any storms that are moving across the Pacific or toward Alaska. Right now, that's steering those close to the central and western Bering Sea on winds that are coming in from the south and the west, but then those are kind of guided a little bit further out toward the Gulf at 55 to 95 knots. So right now we have more of a stronger flow moving things out and away from Alaska, and that's exactly what we saw in the satellite picture. However, this little bit of a bump here downward across the north slope is allowing any storms coming off of eastern Siberia and the Arctic Ocean to kind of graze the north slope and then get zipped off even further northward and out of reach of Alaska. So still kind of in a little bit of a split flow and certainly a drier and warmer flow developing. At 9,000 feet, you can see our ridge of high pressure here across the west. Northerlies working over the Alaska Range and north and easterlies over southeast. Look for low pressure across the western Aleutians. That's guiding in slightly stronger winds at 40 to 50 knots. Down below, we're not seeing anything stronger than small craft advisories right now in the marine areas there, so nothing much to worry about. At 3,000 feet, very light winds across the interior. Northerlies coming out of the middle Yukon Valley, about 5, 10, even 15 knots there. Northwesterlies across the eastern Gulf. Winds are fairly light on the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta and Norton Sound and Seward Peninsula. A little bit of a stronger flow west of the Pribilofs. Southerlies coming in there at 40 to 45. And westerlies across the north slope, generally around 20 knots for your daytime tomorrow at 3,000 feet. Turbulence potential, there could be a couple bumps across the western Brooks Range, north of Red Dog Mine out toward Cape Hope, or Point Hope and Cape Lisburn. And as we get out to the Seward Peninsula, generally below 4,000 feet there, a couple areas of isolated moderate could develop. Kodiak Island and areas in the eastern chain also looking for a couple bumps there as we get into the daytime tomorrow below 4,000 feet. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with an update on the sea ice edge as well as your marine weather. Stay tuned.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of Alaska Public Media and the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, welcome to Hangar Flying. We're very fortunate tonight to have a man that many of you know if you've been in aviation or been around Alaska for any time at all, and that man is Bill Brooks. I've had the pleasure of knowing Bill for many years, and in fact had him on this very program 5 years ago, shortly after he celebrated his 95th birthday, and here he is just recently having celebrated his 100th anniversary, or 100th birthday. Bill, happy birthday.
Well, thank you. Same to you.
So just a little bit of background, and there's so much to tell about Bill, but he started out in the Army Air Corps cadet in the early 40s, and he trained pilots and navigators for the Great War. And Bill, I got to tell you, thank you for your service.
Yeah, well, you're very welcome.
Bill came to Alaska in 1970, and I think the first aircraft you purchased was a Super Cub.
That's right.
Bill-
The first new airplane I ever owned, and I went down and bought a Super Cub. I come up here and saw you needed a Super Cub.
There you go. So now you've got two Beavers, one here and one down in Carefree, isn't it?
That's right.
The other thing I'd like to mention about Bill, he's obviously a seasoned aviator, but was a world-famous race car driver, having set a specific land speed record at the Bonneville Salt Flats, which stood for a long time. Bill was also influential in starting the Air Cargo Association and was responsible for building 5 cargo structures which are in use today. Bill, welcome back to the program.
Oh, thank you.
You've been a part of so many accomplishments, it's hard to know where to start. You got any general thoughts on flying here in Alaska?
What's the question?
Talk a little bit about just flying in Alaska.
Basically making a living. The country, well, you know, if you like a little adventure and like to get out and get away from it, where somebody ever telling you can't do that or you can't fly that low or do something, why, you know, here it's your own life that you're taking, and anybody that happens to be with you. So you just be goddamn careful, and you know, we hunt caribou and moose, and we got a cabin out of Lake Clark, and it's on a cove called Brooks Cove, incidentally, and so we go out there, and there's a tribe of natives out there that happen to be good friends. I got acquainted with them, and in fact, one of them worked for me, Bill Trefon. He just went west here a while back, and he worked for me for quite a little while there in town when we were building the buildings out the International Airport, and a little funny on Bill too. You know, you figure everybody that's just 50 years old or so, you can drive a car, no problem, and I had a Ford truck. He's got a 14-foot box on it, and we was building one of those buildings, and the interior needed cleaning up on one of them, and they were 4 foot off the ground to the dock, so that you could drive a forklift or a hand truck right into the truck, and so I told Bill, go back out and rig up over there that door and clean that building out right there, and I didn't pay any attention to him, and pretty quick I heard a wham, and Bill had got into it. He knew how to start it, and he fooled around until he found reverse. He didn't know how to stop it.
Oh.
And he had him coming back with his foot down on the throttle, just wham, and he hit that building. The good thing was poured concrete. He knocked it off its foundation. I kept that Bill out of the cars after that, but Bill's his people were they really treated me good out at Lake Clark, and I've did this thing back with them. I have paid for some of their berths and got them out of jail, and when I go out there, why I'm Chata Brooks. Chata is grandfather of Athabasca, and if I get in trouble out there, why I know who to get a hold of.
You know, Bill, I want to ask you one question because we're just about out of time. I've always respected your appreciation for aviation safety, and you've always been a safe flyer, and I want to thank you for that, and I want our viewers to look at you and say, now there's a man that knows about aviation in Alaska and that has flown safely for 100 years. So,
yeah,
you know, I really appreciate you being on the program tonight, and I really appreciate
it's my pleasure. Yeah,
you're a great man. And I appreciate your contributions to Alaska. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. Bill Brooks is a real pioneer, and he's somebody that I've admired for many, many years, and he's a person who helped build Alaska. So when you're thinking about flying, think about Bill and fly safe.
Thanks a lot, Harry. We'll see you again on Friday. Here's a look at today's Sea Ice Edge update from our Alaska Sea Ice program. And out across the Beaufort Sea, a lot of open water here. If you look at it with a satellite picture, it's an amazing view, but amazingly low concentration ice right now. There are pieces of multi-year sea ice fairly close to Point Barrow, but one thing to note, none of this is stable right now. If you're looking to get out on the ice for hunting activities, none of this is stable, and a lot of it will be moving around in the coming days here. So again, use extra care and caution if that's something that you're planning on doing. Out across the Chukchi coast again, also looking at some open water there, and then considerable areas of completely open water there west of Kivalina out into the Chukchi. Everything south of the Bering Strait by and large is sea ice free now for the season. There is a little bit of ice on the eastern end of St. Lawrence Island and in the Gulf of Anadyr, but other than that, things are done in the Bering. As we look at southeast, look for winds to come in from the north and west tomorrow. They should be light across the inner channels, 10 to about 20 knots, generally from the northwest. 3 to 4 foot seas in the south, 2 foot seas in the Lynn Canal, and west and northwesterlies coming across the outer coast at about 20 to 25 knots with 6 to 7 foot seas on Tuesday. On Wednesday, north and northwesterly winds still working out of the Lynn Canal and into Stevens Passage, a southeasterly flow for Clarence Strait with a 15-knot wind, and north and northwesterly winds along the outer coast 15 to 20, with seas as low as 6 feet in the north and as high as 8 feet in the south, just outside of the Dixon entrance. Across south central, look for a broad northwesterly flow on Tuesday, about 15 to 20 knots or so across most areas there. A little bit stronger east of the Barren Islands at 30 knots with an 11-foot sea, 8-foot seas there east of Marmot Island and southward towards Sitkinak with an 8-foot sea. As we get into Wednesday, that diminishes even more by Wednesday afternoon. 6-foot seas there, broad westerlies across the north and western Gulf. Northwesterly winds inside of Prince William Sound. Should be fair weather and small seas and light winds. Looks like a beautiful day out on the Sound. Westerlies across the northern Cook Inlet and light and variable flow inside of Shelikof Strait. Also, if you're taking a quick trip down to Raspberry Island, the ferry should have a smooth sail there. 2-foot seas are expected in the region. And as we look at Bristol Bay, look for light winds across the bay, about 15 knots with a 4-foot sea. Northwesterlies continue across from Castle Cape to Chignik at 25 knots. A little bit faster flow and higher seas with a 6-foot sea there. Southwesterlies coming in from Sand Point and King Cove. And northeasterlies down in the Bering Sea, looks like 2-foot seas there down the coast. As we get into Wednesday, winds should remain pretty light. Remember, this is all under high pressure that's slowing things down, stabilizing the atmosphere around western and south central and the interior of Alaska. And on top of that, winds are going to be pretty light. So a lot of sunshine, a lot of heat, and very light winds. 10 to 15 knots, it looks like. 2-foot seas across the Bering Sea coast and 6-foot seas for the Pacific coast. For the Aleutians, a south and southeasterly flow is expected there on Tuesday. Winds will run around 25 to 30 knots or so across the Bering Sea, 20 to 25 across the Pacific coast, 8 to about 9-foot seas across the Pacific. And then south and southeasterly winds from Kiska to Attu with 8-foot seas there on Tuesday afternoon. For Wednesday, a little bit more of a shift. South and southwesterlies are expected, 3-foot seas north of Unalaska. How often do we get to say that? 5 to 8-foot seas there from Nikolsky out toward Adak, and then 7 to 8-foot seas across the west. Look for small seas across the Pacific coast and even light and variable winds south of Unalaska and Nikolsky. It looks like a gem, a beauty of a day for Wednesday there across the eastern chain. For Tuesday, across the west coast, a weak westerly flow will come in around Hooper Bay and Macoriac there, about 15 to 25 south of St. Lawrence Island with 5-foot seas. Northwesterlies, even lighter winds and smaller seas there for Kuskokwim Bay. Things will be pretty nice there across the region just outside of Bristol Bay. Southeasterlies a little bit stronger around the Pribilofs, 25 knots with a 6-foot sea. As we get into Wednesday, look for that southeasterly flow to develop from St. Lawrence Island to Nunivak Island, 15 knots there, about 4-foot seas, 8-foot seas out around St. Matthew with a stronger wind around 20 knots. And west and southwesterlies are expected into Kuskokwim Bay. Again, those will be pretty small throughout the rest of Wednesday and probably into Thursday, 2-foot seas there. And southerlies diminish around St. Paul and St. George, a 5-foot sea there for Wednesday out in the Pribilofs. Now for the North Slope, southerlies will continue across the Chukchi coast, and outside of Kotzebue Sound, you're looking at about 15 to 25 knots. And remember, all of the ice across the coastal areas now is unstable, and a lot of areas are continuing to open up. On top of that, warmer weather is working into the region, and with that, we'll see a little bit more melting and reduction of the ice. So again, use extra caution if you're planning any hunting activities across the coast. Across the Beaufort Sea, a south and westerly flow is expected, 15 knots there. We still have not listed any seas forecast for areas around Point Barrow since there's too much ice. 2-foot seas are expected across the Beaufort at this point for Tuesday, and as we get into Wednesday, you'll notice the wind switching around once again. More of a north and northwesterly flow for areas along the Chukchi coast. Seas should remain pretty small until you get outside of Kotzebue Sound. A 4-foot sea there with a northerly flow, and easterlies around Kaktovik to Dead Horse, where they become northerly once again on that 15-knot wind. Seas there at 3 to 5 feet in the open water. Let's recap what's happening across the rest of Alaska as we go into tonight. High pressure is in control of the North Slope, and areas of low cloud should be expected with that. Showers around the Brooks Range as this wave of weather is working from west to east. We've seen thunder and lightning here across the Brooks Range and along the Yukon Valley. A lot of that will diminish fairly quickly this evening, it looks like. We've also seen showers and thunderstorms developing around parts of the Talkeetnas, southward toward the Chugach and the Kenai Range. Most of that has been considerably more isolated than what we saw northward tonight. A few showers around southeast. Things are pretty dry by and large for the interior, south central, and southwest. Out across the west, a new wave of low pressure is working northward, but it's running into very stable high pressure across the west coast, and this is going to bring some very warm conditions to the interior, south central, and probably even southeast as we get into Wednesday and Thursday. The wave of weather in the west will fall apart pretty quickly as we get into the midweek. Look at the sunshine across the interior, the Seward Peninsula, even up north. Things are going to be fairly dry for you. A few showers across the eastern Brooks Range, a little bit more of a steadier rainfall possible for the Beaufort Seacoast, maybe as far west as Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse and out toward Kaktovik and the Alcan border. East into the Yukon and British Columbia, a better chance for showers and thunderstorms there than really any part of Alaska, but fire danger concerns will be growing in this type of weather pattern. And don't forget, if you're in Juneau and southeast and want to make it into Juneau, I'll see you at the National Weather Service office there Thursday afternoon. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Sometimes the best way to find a living is to stay right where you are and study with UAS online. Career-specific distance programs from the University of Alaska Southeast are the fastest way to increase your earning power.
We connect all over the world.